Thank you, everybody, for attending tonight's webinar. We have another new one tonight. I'm Lisa Klein with UGA Extension in Gwinnett County, and I am on the Agriculture and Natural Resources team, also the Master Gardener Coordinator. And I try to do all sorts of new webinars a couple times a month because, hey, everybody gets bored. So sometimes you want to try some new stuff, right? So this one is actually something that I thought to do because I used to do a lot of this in one of my former jobs. I used to be a fisheries biologist for Department of Natural Resources here in Georgia. And as part of that position, which was a lot of field work, I would go out and do a lot of erosion control for construction companies. So when permits would come in, I would have to review the permits, and then I would have to go out and take a look and see what they were doing and were they doing everything correctly. And if they weren't, then we would discuss that. Sometimes there'd be a stop work order, that kind of thing. Um, Now, having said that, once that building or that subdivision is constructed and handed over to a homeowner, things change. Sometimes the geoengineering, the grading, all of those things is not done really well. Engineers are great and they're great at math and they're great at everything else, but sometimes in real life, it doesn't work. And there's a lot of drainage issues here in Georgia because we have so many hills. So having the knowledge to know what to do is a great thing. And I find that I had almost 80 people registered for this, so there must be a need for that out there. I don't have quite 80 people here now, but hopefully we'll have more folks watching once it gets up onto the Metro Master Gardener YouTube channel. So this webinar is going to be packed with some knowledge so that you know what hydrology is, why it's important, how do you manage rainfall, what kinds of things can you do on your own property to try to control erosion, to fix it, to prevent it, all the things. I'm sure most of you are probably here because you have some place on your property where you're experiencing some kind of erosion. Maybe it's just simply your grass is kind of dying back and you're noticing that a lot of soil is washing away. Maybe you have a lot of hills and you can't keep grass, and so you're seeing a lot of dirt and it's just very frustrating. We all know that when subdivisions go in, that developers will develop every single lot, and sometimes that means you've got a vertical backyard and they don't want to put the money into retaining walls. So you're kind of stuck with what you're stuck with. So let's start and take a look. So where soil goes, life follows. And really you want to protect every single grain of soil. Or particle, however you want to think about that, because you're all pretty much gardeners, I would think, although there may be some others that are just interested in this as a topic alone. You can't really grow things unless you have topsoil, and that is the first thing to wash away. So it's very important to protect what's there. So why erosion matters? Well, here's some facts that are just sometimes you scratch your head and you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize it was that bad. So arable land would be land that would be used as farmland. Up to 30% has been lost to erosion, worldwide, of course. It can take a long time to get 1 millimeter of topsoil. So zero 0.2 to 1 millimeter is created per year. But erosion, that means rain coming down, washing it away, removes 10 to 40 times more than can be naturally replaced, which means you've got to be very careful about preserving what you have. It can take 1,000 years to replace 1 inch of topsoil. And so here in Georgia, we don't have a lot of topsoil. Some parts of the country have an inch or two, couple inches. We don't have that much. So here, maybe an inch, a half an inch, three-quarters of an inch. We just don't have a lot of topsoil here. So it's very important to conserve what you have. When you don't have good soil, your crop yields can go down, sometimes up to 50%. So again, very important on a large scale to protect your soil. And non-point source pollution. I'm sure we've all driven over a creek after a rain and it's gone from being fairly clear to being very muddy. That's all topsoil sediment. So that comes from non-point source pollution. So it's very important to make sure we're keeping rainwater on site. So if you have your own home, if you have property, keep it on the site of your home, on your property. And we have, and you can see there, they've drained a reservoir in that middle picture and they're dredging it out. And that's because so much sediment gets caught there. And so they have to like remove it so they can get the depth back. So it's really important, as you can see, to keep that soil and the water as much as you can on your property. So here's some famous, you know, erosion issues, if you will. We had the 1930s Dust Bowl, and you can see that on the bottom. 30 million tons of topsoil could be transported from the Midwest to the East Coast, and that was because of improper farming practices. So, again, we got to make sure that we're doing the right things, and you'll learn about some of those. Haiti, deforestation. I mean, I know a lot of developers love to come in and cut every single tree down, and then they go back and they plant one tiny little tree in the front yard, and that's not enough. You can see Haiti is on the top and Dominican Republic is on the bottom. And you can see Haiti is pretty deforested. Today, they only have about 2% of their land is forested, and that's not nearly enough. Not enough in agriculture to support them or in the forest canopy. And then you have China's lowest plateau. So, due to over grazing and deforestation, they've lost over 2 billion tons of topsoil. So, I mean, you look at that, there's not much growing there. It was very fertile a long time ago, but because of improper management, no longer. So let's kind of go through some of the basics. I'm not going to really focus on here because that's probably not what you're here to learn about. You want to know about erosion and how do I fix it, right? But you have to kind of understand some basics of hydrology. So that's going to be how water moves through a landscape. That's going to be the water cycle. So that's going to help determine where erosion is going to begin and kind of where if intervention on your part as a property owner or business owner who maybe owns some property will be most effective. So you need to understand how water lands on a site, how it moves through a site, and how it exits, right? So if it's coming down as a raindrop, if it's running over the top in sheet flow because maybe the neighbor up the hill isn't doing a very good job of containing his water. So knowing the grade of your land, the topography, if you will, it can really help in what you need to do or what you need to learn to do to keep that water slow and allow it to infiltrate on your land and to try to preserve it. We want to try to keep as much on your property as possible. So grading and soil structure is very important here. And as I mentioned before, I'm going to talk probably a lot about subdivisions because we have so many of them around here. They've replaced farms for the most part here in Gwinnett County and in the surrounding Atlanta metro area. Now, if you are in South Georgia or you are outside of Georgia and you are on property, then a lot of these principles also apply to you. So you can easily scale them up. But grading and soil structure definitely influence water movement. And you can see that on farmland where you'll have rills where it rains really hard and then it comes down into like gullies and moves down. We'll look at some of that. But proper grading in a subdivision or on property that's being developed is very important because that helps spread the water out and you don't want it concentrating and flowing down into a depression because that's what's going to erode that soil away. So you're going to look for gentle, even slopes. So if you're house hunting, if you see a house that has a fairly even, gentle slope or almost flat, go for it. It's worth more money, honestly, and it's going to better preserve your property. If you have a house that's way up on a hill and they haven't done much landscaping, that's going to end up costing you a lot of money because you're going to have some erosion problems. Swales, which are kind of depressions like this, and contouring in the land can help redirect that water so that you can have a place for it to kind of sink down in or infiltrate, and good non-compacted soil. So don't drive over it. I mean, I know there's probably some folks that have property. If you have dirt bikes, that's going to compact the soil. Parking a vehicle on your front lawn over and over again, that's going to compact the soil. That affects how it absorbs. So compacted soil, water's not going to infiltrate. It's going to run right off. And that's going to be a problem. So try not to park on your front lawn. Try not to run dirt bikes over areas that are really hilly. You really want to add in some organic matter, some mulch, pine bark, that kind of stuff, pine straw. There's all sorts of things. That's going to add organic matter back to the soil. So here's some verbiage that I might talk about. I've already kind of mentioned these. Infiltration, that just basically means how that water gets down into the soil. How does it get down in there? There's a rate. We can calculate that. That's going to be your soil textures. That's going to have organic matter, all the good things. Sand typically is a much bigger particle, soil particle, whereas clays are very tiny. So in a sandy soil, it's going to infiltrate and percolate down in there real fast. Think about Florida. You have to water all the time because it's got sand everywhere, right? Whereas here, we have a lot of clay, and clay will hold water. That's actually what they use in ponds to seal the bottom. So the clay particles are very small. And higher infiltration, you're going to have less surface runoff. So think a big forested area versus a parking lot. In a parking lot, that's going to run off really fast. Whereas in a forested area, that's going to sink down in there and it's going to get down into the groundwater and down into the aquifers. And that's what we want. That's why we like seeing more trees, why we don't recommend you remove trees from your property, because they do such a good job of holding all that water in there. So percolation, that's how long water is going to stay in that root zone. And you're going to have, if you don't have much topsoil, you've got larger rocks and things that are in there. It's going to be really hard for that to percolate down and get into the aquifer. So having looser soil that maybe has a good mixture of sands and silts and clay in there, that's good both for plants and for allowing water to get down in there. Um, Runoff velocity, that also is something that's very important. When you have a lot of hills, then that means that water can pick up speed really fast as it's coming down that hill. As water picks up speed, it's able to pick up soil particles. The faster it's moving, the more and the larger particles it can pick up. Now, you saw a couple slides back, there was a flood. So think about if you have 1 inch of water and you have fast moving water in, say, a flood situation, would you drive your car into that? No. The sign, they always say, turn around, don't drown. And there's a reason, because water is an amazing force. It has the ability to move that multi-ton vehicle because it's really hard to describe. So, and when you're looking at boulders, probably the biggest thing, Helene, if you have been able to get up in Western North Carolina, it's probably one of the just stark reminders of how nature is just such a force. Because if you drive through some of the areas that got 20 plus inches of rainfall, you can see all the water that has scoured down through some of where these small streams were. And it moved huge boulders the size of a house. It's kind of mind numbing. But anyway, just know water is a very, it's just got a lot of strength to it and roughness. And then slope length. So how long is that slope? Is it a very short one? Is it a very long one? The longer it is, the more speed that water is going to get an ability to pick things up and take it. So when we're talking about correcting erosion issues, we talk about how are we going to break that slope length up so that we can slow that runoff velocity down so that you get more infiltration and percolation. Okay. Okay, so why does erosion occur? Well, I've got some pictures here. So deforestation, when you take that forested cover away, then suddenly where's that rain going to go? It's going to hit all that debris. It's going to flow if it's on a slope. There's nothing to protect it anymore. Poor land management. You can see there in the middle one that you have a fence and it's halfway hanging there because that stream, it got to flood stage. It was just used grass to basically hold it into place. And that's not enough. The root system's not dense enough to hold that there. So all those little trees and shrubs and a lot of that land is now in the stream and down the river. Flooding over areas where vegetation has been removed. Again, I'll use that middle one as a good example. Construction and land development. There's reasons why they have pretty strict erosion control standards where you have to put silt fence up. You're supposed to hydroseed and put something on there to start to grow to hold that soil in place. It's very important that construction companies follow that. Poor farming practices, we already talked about the Dust Bowl. That breaks down some of those soil particulates and it makes it easy for it to blow away. And that's what happened. And then, removing vegetation from steep slopes, not the best thing because now instead of having trees and shrubs and all the things to hold that down, it can't do that anymore. It's not there. So you end up with that sheet flow and erosion, and suddenly, yeah, so here's some indicators of erosion. So if you're out in your property and you're looking around in your backyard and you see just bare soil, not good. Now, as a gardener, you might want to plant in that. But muddy runoff, I already mentioned that. If you see it going from clear to suddenly it's very muddy, that's an indication that's holding silt. It's picked that up from somewhere. Silt dams. So at the base of a tall hill or a slope down at the bottom, if you see these delta looking things like you would see at the Mississippi River when it enters the Gulf of Mexico, that's a silt dam. That means it's flowed down the slope and it's collected there. You might see rills. So if you have an area that's been under construction or a hillside that's eroding and you see these deep little gullies that are forming, that's what a rill is. A soil pillar. Maybe you've had, a rock or something that's there and the soil out from around it has been eroded away, but because it's protected on top, that's a soil pillar. Exposed tree roots, another one. Reduced organic matter. If you're seeing like your mulch and your organic matter that you maybe did some top dressing on your lawn and now it's down at the bottom of your yard. You might have cracks along the top of a slope like you see down there. You might have tunnels that are starting to form. Water will find a way. So it'll actually go subterranean and then it all collapses in. You might have thin topsoil. That's what we have here in Georgia. You might have a soil buildup along fences. That's more for farming practices. And then sediment fans. So that's a real bad one down in the bottom left. So the types, splash erosion, that's what you get with a raindrop. Sheet erosion, when you get surface flow that goes over the top of the soil. That's sheet erosion. It picks stuff up as it goes along. Rill, that's going to be where you have a big, maybe a recently graded area. And so water finds a way. It's going to find the slightest little depression and it will flow there and then it will continue on down. And then it gets deeper and deeper and deeper. Gully erosion, that's even worse. Those are really difficult you actually have to get in there with heavy equipment to grade that. Tunnel or the subsurface erosion. Sometimes that happens around here when you get a water line that breaks or cracks and it washes all the soil out and then it all collapses. Stream bank, that's one that we try to tell folks do not put your grass right down to the edge of your stream. You're supposed to have a 25-foot buffer of vegetation along a warm water stream here in Georgia, 50 foot along a trout stream. So it's very important that you do not clear all the way down to the edge of the water. That's just going to end up looking something like that, what you see there at the top. Wind erosion, we'll get a little bit of that here, but you see a lot of that out west. Glacial, that's going to be up more in the Midwest. mechanical or thermal, that's a freeze thaw cycle. So how many of you have garden art? I have some Mexican pottery, and freeze and thaw on terracotta will cause it to flake and break. And so that would be a good example of what the freeze thaw cycle is. And then biological, that's going to be like allowing cows or horses to run along a stream. That tramples vegetation and allows them to do damage, and that gets into the waterways. So here's some more terms: revetment, siltation, erosion control, matting, open weave. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on that. Wattles, those are those uh, kind of round tubes that you see that are kind of along banks that hold things in. Riprap, that's rock. You see some of that in that bottom picture. Rock armoring using larger rocks. You also see that there. Geotextiles, those are going to be those fabrics, biodegradable fabrics that are to help stabilize the soil and allow you to maybe to put some um, grass seed for hydro seeding, or plants or other things. They're usually used on very steep slopes to help stabilize. And then French drains, and we'll talk some more about that as we go through. So tips to prevent soil erosion. So you want to increase the organic content, and think gardening. Like, plants really like organic matter. It fluffs up the soil. It's easier for their roots to get through. It really helps the texture of really hard Georgia clay, and it increases water retention. So same thing here. It allows all the things that plants need. So if you go and you increase organic matter in the soil from like 1 to 3%, that really cuts down on a lot of erosion. And you don't ever want to leave the soil surface uncovered. Now, I already preached this just as a general rule in a garden. I always say mulch it, mulch it, mulch it. I don't care what you put on it, but mulch it, because the sunlight, the UV rays will break down organic matter. So when you do that, you're already helping things, but you're also helping with erosion, because when you cover up that soil with pine bark, with pine straw, any other type of mulch, you're covering it and protecting it so it doesn't get washed away. And that's also going to help with permeability and allow infiltration, because you want that raindrop to stay there long enough so that it can get down into the soil and percolate down. You want to use mulch to cover that soil on gentle slopes. A lot of people probably have grass on the slopes. That's fine. You do need to periodically top dress. About every 10 years or so, you need to come in and you need to apply about 3/4 of an inch of organic matter. Just compost is fine over the top of that and allow it to settle in. Do that after a core aeration. That will help your grass be much healthier and happier. You also want to think about planting some trees and shrubs. And if you're going to do any soil disturbing activities, you want to use a silt fence. That's going to hold back water so that it doesn't gain velocity or the speed and pick up that soil and carry it on down. So if you're doing any grading, like maybe you're building a house and you've got a lot of slopes on there, consider doing some grading to reduce the steepness of those. That's going to help slow everything down as that water runs over the top of it. You can add barriers or those wattles that you see over there. And there's all sorts of new products on the market. You can see that they've got some plastic, kind of diamond shaped. I don't know what you call that exactly, but you can put mulch, you lay that over the top and you anchor that down, and then you put mulch over the top of it. It helps hold the mulch in place, because when you've got a slope like that, which is probably about 3 to 1, 3 feet of increase to height to 1 foot of distance, then that's going to wash off that slope real fast. You can also do some, oh gosh, I just blanked. Um, you've got the wattles there, and then terracing. There you go. You can also do some terracing, and then that gives you an area where you can plant. So you could put vegetables, you can put flowers, really what you want. But if you're one of those unlucky people that ended up with a very steep backyard, this is an excellent way that you can recoup that again and use that for something. And then you have the dry stream bank or dry riverbed that will help you channel that water. So if you have an area where it runs through in your backyard, that's kind of a depression, that the developers or the engineers said, let's just have it run all the way down the hill in the back here and cause all sorts of problems. And you're like, where'd my grass go? Well, you can come in and put a dry riverbed in, and that will serve its purpose while it's raining. It's going to look attractive and you can landscape around it. So we'll talk about that. So bare slopes, losing soil after heavy rain, cover it up. These are common problems. Gutters or downspouts, like you see in that picture, see them all the time. Runoff from neighboring properties, so many calls from people about this. And it's hard because it's not on your property. And eroding a creek or drainage ditch banks, a lot of the streams around Metro Atlanta are incised because we've got so many impervious surfaces around here. Street or sorry, roads, subdivisions, all of the things, and they all flow into these waterways. The water's not held, and it just cuts out and makes a stream that used to be fairly shallow. Suddenly, it's like 15 feet down. Mulch or topsoil washing off your garden beds. If you've got, a new yard like you see here, this house in the middle, they haven't put anything down on that soil. They just graded it and it rained and it washed it all into the gutters. That's a big no-no. You're supposed to have something on there to stabilize that, by the way. Um, Wind erosion, if you don't have anything down, or maybe the mulch just kind of got away from you. Now, you've got a real windy area, you're up on top of a hill. And tree removal, maybe you went in and pulled back some trees from around the house. Insurance companies are requesting folks do that now because they don't want the liability. Well, you got to put something there where those trees used to be. You can see the bottom picture that's a newly graded home. You can see some new sod there. They've got something down on the slope, but nothing's growing there, and you can see where it's all draining. And whoever buys that's not going to be very happy. So, at least once a year, if you are in a home that you own, at least once a year, kind of walk around your yard. You don't have to be a gardener, but this is property management 101, your biggest investment. Look for exposed roots on trees. That's you see there in the middle one, that tree is kind of old. A lot of times they'll start to become more and more noticeable because the soil's washing away. It's not necessarily going to hurt or kill the tree, but it's an indication you might need to do some top dressing. Splashing mud. If you see it splashed up on a building, splashed on your sidewalk, you shouldn't have any of that. You should have vegetation that's helping to prevent that. So that means you need to take care of that area where it's bare and open to the elements. Ponding or pooling, like you see in that top one. Um, so there's a low point right there. And that's not good for trees. Trees can start to asphyxiate after 15 minutes, so it's important that you get that grading issue taken care of. You can divert that water, you can get it moved somewhere else so that you don't have to worry so much about that low area. Rills or gullies, if you see those forming on a slope in your backyard, not good. Get that taken care of before it gets much worse. So you either need to do some grading, you need to add in some topsoil. You may need to resod. I usually tell people they're like, well, I don't have any money to sod, and I want to seed. And I ask them, how sloped is your property? And if they say, well, I've got a good number of hills on it, a word of advice, you will end up probably reseeding 2 or 3, maybe 4 times in order to get that seed to stay on those slopes because every rain we have here will wash it away. It's going to take you 2 or 3 years of really aggressive management to get that to seed and to stay and to grow. You are far and away going to probably regret that decision and probably should just spend the money to sod it. That's my that's my professional advice there. I've seen too much. Bare patches and grass. I mean, we see lots of reasons for that. You do need to do some work on it. You can't just overseed on hard compacted clay. So you need to do some messing around with that a little bit. Give us a call at Extension, email us. We can tell you exactly what you need to do to fix that. Easy fixes. So mulching bare soil, as I mentioned, don't leave it bare. If you've got a bare spot in your lawn, go over there, scratch that up, put some type of organic matter compost or something down, and then put some seed down, or scratch it up, put a little soil down, and then put a piece of sod there. You can also, if you've got wood beds around a tree, you can put a couple inches of wood mulch, pine straw, shredded leaves, that kind of thing. In fact, we encourage that around trees. We do not want the turf growing right up to the trunk. We prefer that to be further away towards the drip line of the tree. Put ground covers. I've done that on my own property. I've got a slope up here next to my driveway. I've got Liriope monkey grass growing there. It grows very dense. It does an excellent job of slowing all that water down. So you can use things like that, native grasses, other stuff like that to slow it all down. Use rock or gravel to stabilize the area. Rock beds, gravel channels, those dry stream beds. Maybe you can just get riprap. Gwinnett County, if you are in Gwinnett County and you have an erosion issue, you can apply to have them bring a load of riprap. That's big chunks of granite out to your property, and you can use that to help with erosion control. Um, Redirecting downspouts. I showed you that picture before where the foundation was very obviously there and you could see where it had eroded away. You need to do something like this. It doesn't have to be as elaborate as this picture here on the bottom where they're piping everything away with very expensive PVC pipe. You can go get the corrugated black plastic pipe. You can set up kind of a French drain system. If you've got, like I've got the black plastic pipe and it drains it away into an old gully that was here on the property long before the house was built. Does a great job. And you can also do terraces. That's also a good thing to do, especially if it's very steep. If it's very steep, terracing is probably going to be your friend. It's a lot easier to recoup some of that area to grow things and make it look a little bit more like this right here. So you can see the nice stonework. Obviously, that's a lot of money right there. You may not have the money to do that. You can do it with landscape timbers. You can do it with landscape stone that you purchase, the blocks that you can get at the big box stores. There's a lot of options there. And of course, all the beautiful vegetation going in there and planting that, it's going to hold all that soil down and do a great job for you. Um, you may need to add a rain garden. That is something that we really evangelize about keeping all of that water on your property. So if you have a lot of slope to your property, you may want to consider putting a rain garden. And we'll talk a little bit about the dry creek bed and then adding maybe a rain garden to the bottom. You can edge garden beds to help keep mulch and soil in place. So if you have a slight slope, you can always come in with some of that black plastic edging. You can buy, edging bricks or stones, and that helps keep it all in there. You can use that straw or the jute erosion control mats. That's going to be probably seen more in commercial applications. But if you have a really big area out back that's pretty steep, and let's say you want to put some creeping juniper or something on there, and you need something to hold it down in the meantime, you can purchase that. It's available online. You can add a French drain for persistently wet areas. So a French drain, basically, they dig out a trench. You'll see a picture of one in one of the slides coming up. You dig a trench out, you backfill with gravel, you have a black plastic pipe that has holes in it, and then you put more gravel over the top and then usually landscape fabric. And that helps allow water to infiltrate down to that pipe and then move out of the area. Sometimes you'll add it with a grate, like a box grate, if you have a really severe pooling problem, and then that can move it out faster. But there's a lot of options there. If you have a tree that you've removed, a big old tree that was formerly shading out your turf, go in there and replant it. You don't have to put turf back. We can help you if you want to try to match your grass species that you already have. It's almost impossible to go find the same stuff. So you basically clone your existing grass. Works very well if you have Bermuda Urzoi, so we can help you with that. Um, but go in there, maybe put a new planting bed, put some flowers, something. And then again, I can't stress enough if you slow that water velocity down because that water velocity will pick a lot of those soil particles up. So you can do something like doing a contour bed, checkerboard. We'll talk about that. All right, so do it yourself projects, DIY. Yeah, I know you all were here and you were probably hoping for something like that, right? Because who's got $30,000 laying around for a highly engineered project? Not me. I don't even check my pockets. Probably just lint there. So you can do things like vegetation planting, rain gardens, no-till gardening, retaining walls, and dry creek beds. There are other things, but these are probably the easiest, I should say, and maybe the least expensive things that you can do to help with what issues that you've got in your own property. So, vegetation planting. I know that sounds like, okay, I'm gonna what, throw some seeds on the hillside and it's all gonna go, pretty and take care of everything. Not quite. You have to put a little bit of thought into it. So, you can see here on the top, that's planting on the contour. So if you've been driving through the country and you saw a big pasture and you noticed these little ledges. So they've gone in and they've terraced essentially to help slow down any runoff from that big grassy area in that pasture. You're going to kind of do the same thing. So, how you handle that is up to you. Here, you can see in that top one that they've taken stacked stone and they've made stacked stone beds. You can get landscape um, blocks at big box stores and do that. You can get 4x4 landscape timbers and do that. Or if you just have a very, very subtle slope to it, you could actually go in and do a little grading with just a shovel to kind of make a flat area where you can then plant in between down on that slope. So it really depends a little bit on how much of a slope you have. But the point being is that that water is going to hit that row kind of like a speed bump. It's going to slow it down. It's going to spread out a little bit, and that gives it the opportunity to soak down or infiltrate. The soil is going to stay in place and it's not going to wash downhill. And it's one of the best erosion control strategies that you can use for a sloped yard. You don't have to do it on the whole thing. So if you've got like a hill here and a hill here, and you've got water that's coming down the middle, you can go in and add something like this just in the middle, among other things. And there are other things. We'll talk about those too. You can do a staggered or a checkerboard planting. So here they've got little cabbages, but I call it the Plinko method because if you've ever played The Price is Right, you remember the Plinko board. You take something, you put it up the top, and it goes down and it hits, a peg, and then it goes over here and it hits that peg over here, over here, over here. Does it ever get much velocity? Does it get fast? No. It's actually pretty slow, even though it's straight up and down. The velocity is very low. And that's the theory here is that when you use space plants like this, where you have an uneven number like 5 or 7, and then you put one directly below it, as that water's coming down the slope, it's going to come down, it's going to hit that plant and slow down, move around that plant, and then disperse, go down, hit the next row of plants, slow down, disperse around those, and so on and so forth until it finally gets down. It looks great when you use some type of muhly grass, a native grass, or other types of grasses on a hillside. They kind of fill out and they get bigger and fuller and they look really pretty and they don't require a lot of maintenance. But they do a fantastic job of holding that soil down, slowing that water down, and virtually eliminating any of your erosion issues that maybe you had prior to that. Um, you can also do staggered or checkerboard and the way of what you see down there in the bottom picture. So a couple different ways of doing it. You can see they've got all sorts of different types of plants that are there. They've got a lot of kind of ground cover type shrubs and things like that, you can mix and match. There's no rules necessarily. I mean, as long as it's growing, it's easy to maintain and you don't have to go there and stand and water it all the time, and it's easy to take care of. Hey, that's perfectly fine. You can do something like this where you have ground cover bands. This is going to be something more that you would probably see in a commercial situation, but you can do that. It's kind of terracing, but it could give you an interesting look depending on what you planted. So it's going to have strips of vegetation. And as that water goes down that slope, it's going to hit that strip of vegetation, slow down, disperse a little bit, trickle through, and then go down and do the same thing until it finally gets down to the bottom. So it slows that water down, it traps any sediments, protects the bare soil. And underneath that, you would also have some type of landscape fabric. I've seen the bottom one here that's putting some type of an anchor plant in. This is a creeping juniper, and it's great for sunny hillsides. It does not like shade. It doesn't like water. So on a hillside, it should do great for you if you do the full sun type situation. So you can put juniper, native grasses is another good thing that you can put there. You can put Liriope, that's another good one because it doesn't care if it's sunny or shady. But those roots will all grow together, and then the vegetation also will eventually grow together. And that does a double whammy by holding that soil in place and breaking up the raindrops so they slow down and infiltrate. It's going to reduce any washouts, rills, gullies, that kind of thing. And it works really well. Junipers do well here in Georgia, so that's a good option. Lastly, layered planting. This one is very attractive. You can see this is a very steep hillside, and they've come in and they've put a lot of different plants there. You can put trees and shrubs and ground covers and grasses and flowers, mostly perennials, things that you don't have to do anything with, right? Who wants to climb up there and deadhead? I'm not doing that. So whatever you put here needs to be pretty easy to take care of to the point where you really don't have to do much other than just get it established. So let's kind of move on and we're going to talk about rain gardens. So rain gardens are a good thing to have here in Georgia. We get it's feast or famine, but when we get rain, it could be an inch, it could be 5 inches, it could be 7 inches. Some of these thunderstorms that come through and some of these tropical storms that we get dump a ton of rain. Just as a comparison's sake, around Metro Atlanta, we'll get about 53 inches of rain a year. Okay. Up in the far northeastern corner, up in Sky Valley, which is almost into Western North Carolina, 73 inches of rain. So 20 more inches of rain up there. It's considered a temperate rainforest. Very hilly also. And then you go up to the breadbasket in the Midwest. Do you think they get more or less rain than us? Well, they get less, about 31 inches of rain a year. And they don't typically get the gully washers that we do. Plus, it's a lot flatter up there. So they don't have as much of an issue with velocity and sheet flow and all the things that we deal with. So here, because we have such growth in the Atlanta metro area, it's important to keep that water, if we can, on site and allow it to percolate down into the soil on our property. I know subdivisions have retention ponds. You probably all driven past them, but it's really not doing much, not as much as we think. It's way better to keep as much as you possibly can on your property. So right now, we don't have a very good publication in Georgia about rain gardens. So the next best one is South Carolina. This is actually a good one. We did an advanced training for master gardeners this last summer and came up with a list of color coded rain garden plants, plants that can tolerate wet feet. And those will eventually, hopefully, make it into our publication, which we'll be working on over the next couple years. So Georgia should have one in the next couple years, hopefully. And you can choose you would have a canned or a choice size of a rain garden, and then It lists which plants and what level of wet feet they like based on the number of drops, raindrops. And then you can go back and you can choose shady, sunny, based on what kind of wet feet. So it should be pretty easy, plug and play essentially. Design and sizing, you're going to remove soil to make a little bit of a depression. You're going to add sand and compost so that you can get more infiltration. Remember, sand is a good drain, good for drainage. And you're going to go in and plant native plants. You really want it to be, now there are actual calculations, and if you go to this document, it'll tell you how to do this. I'm just kind of skimming over this. But the area should be about 20% of the size of your roof or driveway. Those are impervious surfaces, okay? So those are where rain is going to collect and flow. You'd be shocked at the amount of rain you can get off of 1 inch on a roof. And we also encourage rain barrels, by the way. And yes, you can collect rain here. I know out west you're not allowed to do that, but here in Georgia we have plentiful rain. You can totally do that here. You want it to be a little bit longer and wider. It can be irregular shaped, that's fine. And it needs to be at least 10 feet from a foundation because of obvious reasons. You don't want it to erode, you don't want it to sink back in and ruin your foundation. You're going to do a perk test, similar to what you would do if you're building a house, needed a septic tank. And you can see there, I don't need to go over the details of that. Lots of videos available online if you want to visually watch somebody do a perk test so you make sure you do it correctly. And then you're going to kind of select your plants. And this is the fun thing. So remember that plant list I said that eventually will be part of our rain garden publication. So you can see there it's color coded. And if you zoom in on there, you can see it's got little raindrops. It's broken down by shrubs, it's broken down by perennials and trees and all the things so that you know exactly what tolerates that particular level within that rain garden. And then you can see there's like a little graphic of where you would plant some of those different types of plants, what level. And then there's the beautiful graphic that we got from one of the students over at Gwinnett Tech. They drew that full sun, and full shade rain garden. Those are our canned rain gardens that you can interchangeably take some of the species of plants from the other plant lists. But if you're just curious and you don't have a magnifying glass to read all of those, you can see the plant list. That's just some plants that do really well in rain gardens. And definitely are recommended. As an aside, if you would like the plant list that you see there, the one with the color coded and the raindrops, you can always reach out to me via my email. I'm happy to share just the list right now. It is not part of a bigger publication, but it eventually will be. No-till gardening. Okay, so this is one that is recommended both for farming practices and for just gardeners in general. You don't want to disturb the soil layer very much. So I get it. You don't want your weeds in there. Nobody does. So you can remove the weeds, and then we recommend using an annual type crop or something that we call it chop and drop. And that puts organic matter back into the soil. So don't overly till it because that's going to break up the soil and that allows it to kind of trickle away or blow away. You also don't want to drive over it, like if with a tractor or a tiller, soil compaction. That's a thing. So don't park there. Don't run your golf cart over there. Don't run the dirt bike over there. Don't park in your yard. That's going to keep that compresses that soil down, and so that it makes it almost impossible for anything to infiltrate in there. Useful techniques. You can go in and with no-till to help prevent erosion. So let's say you've got some raised beds like you see down there. You can put landscape fabric or something underneath and put mulch on the top of that to help with weeds. You can do that over the top of your beds to help prevent that from blowing away and from the UV radiation from breaking down the organic matter. You can plant cover crops. Those are all good ideas. Try to avoid heavy tilling. You can get a little, like I think Ryobi used to have one, like a little hand tiller. and just try to use designated pathways. So if you're going to have raised beds, I recommend doing something like what you see below. I do that myself in my own garden. And then go add some compost that'll help bring back the organic matter that the sun breaks down. Retaining walls, this is another option. It can be more expensive, but just as an aside, if it's over 3 to 4 feet, you need to let a professional handle that because you can get some problems. You've got to put some supports in the back to help with hydrostatic pressure, which means that you get water buildup back there and it needs more engineering. So unless you are familiar with that process and you do a lot of research, leave that kind of thing to the professionals. But if you only need a couple courses of stone, like what you see here, some of these landscape blocks, that's totally doable. Um, they're great if you have a steep slope like what you see here, and it can add a terrace level that you can go plant things in, and it looks really pretty. Considerations, I mean, you can use just about anything. You can use landscape timbers, you can use stone, you can use faux stone. You get the blocks. Keep in mind, if you're going to be in your home for a while and you don't want to have to replace a retaining wall, think about the stone because that's basically permanent. If you have landscape uh, timbers, those are going to break down. The materials and the chemicals they use now are a lot less toxic to the environment than the old ones were, but they also don't last as long. So keep that in mind. So how do you build one? I'm only going to zoom through it. There's plenty of places online where you can get the skinny on how to do that, how to build it. You can go there to that Home Depot one. But basically, look at the problem area, check your codes and utilities, choose your material. There's some options there. Measure, mark, and the wall layout so that you know exactly where it's going to go. Dig that base trench. You got to actually dig down and get that below ground for that first layer. Add level the base, lay that first course of blocks, install some drainage behind the wall if it's going to be over 2 feet tall. Because again, hydrostatic pressure, that'll actually push your wall over. Stack courses, and you're going to be staggering those for the strength, and then backfill and finish. And boom, you're done. So I've done one of these with railroad ties. It was a lot of work, but it's lasted quite a long time. All right, dry creek beds, we're going to try to fly through this. So they can be very attractive. They can be kind of boring. The one you see here, little boring, but doing its job. You can see the before and the after. If you want some information on how to do that, you can go to Lowe's. Felt like I had to give them, equal time. So it's going to create a defined pathway, and you're basically going to follow the natural slope. So sometimes if you get a lot of water through there, you can add a French drain in there that will help carry away some of that subsurface water. You can also have it end in the end and have a rain garden at the end. So if you're dealing with a lot of water, you can either pipe it or you can make a big rain garden. There's lots of different options here. You can see how it is actually put. A lot of people have this problem where they came in with the home, they graded at the back of the yard, and maybe you're on a gradual slope down with a house here, a house here, a house there, and that water runs down the backyard, and you can't get grass to grow there, and you're frustrated, right? Rightfully so. That's a perfect place for a dry creek bed because when it rains, it'll move through there. It's not going to be a problem. And you can also put some pretty plants around there that don't mind being wet periodically. It'll look a lot better. It's a lot more functional, slows the velocity down, and your neighbors down below you will probably be more happy. So, again, you can dig a trench 12 to 80 inches deep and 3 foot wide. You can go wider if you want. It kind of depends on how much water is moving through the system. And then kind of consider where you're going to lay. You see here, the top one is a French drain. They've dug down and put landscape fabric in there, backfilled with stone and that corrugated pipe. And then the one down below, they're not going to put a pipe there. They're just putting the landscape fabric down. And then they're going to put in some stone to slow things down and allow it to infiltrate down through that landscape fabric. And then here's the finished one. Um, let's see. You can see the top one here. I'm going to move this over a little bit. So you can see this is a really steep yard in the top picture, and they have drainage coming off the driveway up there. So they've made a little stair step uh, dry stream bed that ends in a rain garden. And they've dug that down to collect that rain. They've got some plants in there that don't mind being wet. Um, and the one down below, below that, the bigger picture, you can see they've got downspouts that are feeding into one, and then what looks like a little bridge or something of landscape stones that go over the top of it. And you can make it look really pretty. So you can either be really boring, you can add some bigger stones to it, you can get really, a really nice look. I don't have anything super special in here, but yeah, I mean, it's kind of depends on what your budget is, essentially. All of these do. Fill it with river rock. Here's another example of what we see all the time. You just have the grading and there's a low spot, and you're trying to figure out how am I going to get this out of my yard so I don't have a swamp? Well, there you go. Gets rid of the swamp. And you can add all sorts of pretty plants along there, and it becomes an interesting feature in your yard. And soon you're, depending on if it's shady or if it's sunny, you can put shade-loving plants there. You can put sun-loving plants. Lots of options. Lots of options. Hang on. There we go. Oops. All right. It's being a little touchy. All right, so we have our conclusions. So that's basically kind of the fast course on things you can do to help with erosion control. So hydrology, you've got to understand water. You've got to understand it. As soon as you go out there and you record what's happening during a rainstorm, you will understand really quick. And that's what I tell people to do. I said, go outside when it's raining, when it's really coming down, and record where you're having issues. That is going to tell you where you need to do your engineering, where you need to put some type of feature that I've told you about here. Native plants. Those are going to be your friends. Remember, right plant, right place, of course. So you can't put a sun-loving native in a shady area. You still have to adhere to its needs. But native plants can be very awesome in this situation because they don't require a ton of care after they're established, as long as they're in the right spot. Smart grading is going to reshape that water flow. So if you have an issue where you've got a low spot and you've got all your neighbor's water and all the other water that's going through your backyard, you can go in there and regrade that if you want to. You can add a small swale in the back. That's a small depression to help move water away. If you've got a lake that just sits back there, healthy soil, make sure you're adding compost, mulch, organic matter, that kind of thing, and cover that soil. You don't want it all that UV radiation to break it down any faster than what it already does. You need to work with water, not against it. So you've got to kind of be familiar with what goes on your property and work within the confines. That advanced training that I had, one of the master gardeners from DeKalb County that took it, she's got a fairly sizable lot for Decatur, and she has a house that's offset or down a hill from the main road. She previously had a circular driveway, and a lot of rain would go down that driveway and was causing all sorts of erosion around the house. And so she went in and actually dug up her driveway and added in, and you can do a lot of really smart landscaping where they put the geotextile fabric down and then they lay these pervious pavers and then backfill around them with pea gravel or other types of gravels. So basically, any rain that flowed off of the road, because she, I think, said was she was down at the bottom of a hill, And any rain that would have hit her driveway and then flowed down infiltrated down through her new driveway. It was very attractive. I mean, it cost a lot of money, but it was very attractive and it looked very nice. So there are all sorts of options here that you can do to try to help fix these issues. Um, so yeah, once you know what the path of the water is, you can work within the solutions that are out there. And there are a lot of solutions out there to fix the issue. And small changes make big impacts. I mean, I'll use her as an example again. She broke up her driveway, but that alone took care of all the thousands of gallons of water that were flowing down the hill, and she was like at the bottom and then down her driveway. And she's like, I was amazed at how it looked differently. It just all the stones that were in there broke up the velocity of the water and the sheet flow, and it just infiltrated down in. So, yeah, and that, folks, I believe is it. So I am happy to share the slide deck on this. If you would like it, you can reach me at that email address there. If you want to watch this again, next week it should be up on the Metro Master Gardener YouTube channel, which is that QR code in the bottom right, and you can check it out there. If you want to look at other classes that I have coming up, I have all sorts of them. You can go over there to the, it looks like, excuse me, it looks like there's some text on there. I apologize. Because you can go to our UGA website and we have a classes and events tab, and everything should be listed there. If you have suggestions for something that you would like to learn more about, I am happy to do the research and present it in a 1-hour webinar. You can email me and I can take a look at that. So I am happy to answer any questions if anybody, let's see, can you show the slide with the list of native plants for rain gardens again? Yes, I can do that, or you can simply email me at this email address right here, and I will provide you the list of all the plants that we compiled along with their tolerance of sun, shade, and water needs or their ability for wet feet. I think that will be a lot better looking than taking a picture of the slide. I'll go back if you really want it though. Okay. Yes, just email me. I think you'll be much happier with the digital file and all of the species list. There are a lot out there. These are all compiled specifically for the Southeast, and their sun, their shade, their part shade, height, width, all the things that everybody wants so that you can interchangeably, you can go, yeah, I don't like that, or I can't get that, but I can get this, and that works. So I'm happy to share that. I'm also, like I said, I'm happy to share the slide decks. And that's basically it. So if anybody has any questions for me, like I said, I did a lot of erosion stuff. I'm very, very familiar with that and how to fix the problems. So you're welcome to either to just email me or give me a call. Email usually works better. I am in and out so much that I can always usually get to email. What would you recommend for covering tree roots? So if you have a very old oak or any other older tree that's been on your property for a while and has exposed structural roots are going to be those roots coming directly off of the trunk flare. So if you have it comes off like this, and then you have these roots that kind of come out and start being exposed the older the tree gets, out to about the drip line, which the drip line is basically the canopy, so the edge of the canopy. You still have lots of roots out past that. Those are the feeder roots, but the structural roots are usually what start to get exposed as the tree gets older. And those you don't necessarily need to cover. We usually recommend, if you're going to cover them, just use maybe a couple inches of tree bark, like, pine bark. You can use pine straw. You don't want to smother them, because if you go much deeper than that, what happens is you can start covering up that trunk flare. So if you're looking at a tree and it's straight up and down where it comes into the soil, that is wrong. That's not supposed to happen. You might want to consider getting a certified arborist because what happens is those tree roots can actually get smothered and die. They need oxygen. But on the other side, if they're too exposed, you can go back in and you can add, a half an inch or so of some type of compost, or you can just put pine bark mulch or pine straw or something like that. That'll break down over time and add organic matter to the soil. The tree is not in danger of falling over or anything like that, but it can look a little ugly. Again, we don't recommend that you have turf all the way up to the base of the tree. We usually recommend that you put some type of planting bed, either mulch or something like that, underneath the tree. So you're just basically not putting anything growing there because that's just going to compete with the tree. So that's kind of what we recommend. Um, any other questions before we sign off for the evening? Oh, thank you. Hopefully everybody learned something. Well, I think that's basically it. So, hopefully, you got a lot of really good ideas for things that you can do in your own yard. And I've got other videos that are up about rain gardens specifically and how you handle that. If you have specific questions that you want me to kind of take a look at and give you some suggestions on erosion control methods for your particular house, I'm happy to take a look at some pictures and give you some suggestions based on what my knowledge is. So I'm happy to do that. You can always send me an email. Um, and that's basically it. So I will go ahead and stop sharing and we will call it a night. So thank you all for attending. Appreciate you being here. Take care.